Thomson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak, as it states on the order paper, in line with what was the basis of a reasoned amendment, namely that we believe that this bill breaks international law. We've already had to stumble our way through the consequences of a Brexit deal that was supposedly oven-ready. And quite frankly, what is proposed in this set of legislation before us today is no better. Because the fact is, Madam Deputy Speaker, if this bill does not break international law, then it's an act preparatory to doing so. Now, I'm going to start out my remarks with being as helpful as I think I can to the government here. And first of all, let me state that I hope I can understand and at least empathise with some of the concerns of people in Northern Ireland over how aspects of the protocol are working, or as they would view it, not working. And secondly, I don't consider that it's unreasonable in and of itself that, in light of experience, the government should seek to try and renegotiate aspects of the deal that has taken effect. However, I am very firmly and clearly of the view that this is absolutely not the way to go about trying to achieve that objective. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm bound to observe that although we're here to talk about a bill in the Northern Ireland Protocol, the issues here do not only affect Northern Ireland. We're subject to a withdrawal agreement which doesn't work for Scotland, or I would contend any other part of the United Kingdom either. There's much rhetoric that the government uses about a precious union, but it's a union, I'm bound to observe, under the stewardship of this government, which didn't pay a great deal of attention to the concerns or priorities of the majorities in Scotland and Northern Ireland which opposed Brexit. And if relations are to be rebalanced across these islands, whether that's cross-community in Northern Ireland or even cross-union, it seems to me that some recognition of those points is long overdue by the government. Yes.
I was very fortunate, Madam Deputy Speaker, to have the honourable gentleman in my constituency where I gave him the opportunity, and I know he enjoyed it, to meet some of the unionist community groups and to meet the fishermen, to meet elected representatives. Every one of those people, and the right honourable member will remember it very well, conveyed to him that the unfairness of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the impact it was having on fishing, the impact it was having on the community, and he will know, the right honourable member will know, that the local community people that he met as well were very fearful of a future where the Northern Ireland Protocol was retained. Does he understand those issues, and would he express that in the Chamber as well?
He's just said that.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention. I recall with great fondness that visit, particularly the discussions we were able to have in Portavogie, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to the honourable gentleman and indeed to everybody that I met when I was last in Northern Ireland to get the chance to discuss these issues. And as I've said, I certainly hope I can empathise and understand at least some of the issues that were there, and if the honourable gentleman will allow me to make some progress, he might see where there are areas perhaps of agreement, but also inevitably some areas of divergence in that. Yes.
I'm very grateful to him, because it seems to me the fundamental issue of debate this evening is all about whether actually the EU would move on the implementation issues that they claim are the only problem. It's not an issue of renegotiation for them, it's an issue of implementation. And they've said that they believe that actually customs formalities can be reduced by about 80%, and the same with sanitary and phytosanitary checks. They believe that the expanded trusted trader scheme could solve a lot of these problems. How confident is the honourable gentleman that actually these things will be delivered, given how long this has been going on for and the effect already evident in Northern Ireland?
I thank the honourable member for Gloucester for that intervention. It certainly appears to me that there is a potential landing zone there between what has been proposed by the European Union, and indeed there's a bit of an overlap with what has been proposed by the UK Government. I would offer to come along with ministers, but they might feel that reinforcements had arrived and somehow weakened their position. But nevertheless, there ought to be a landing zone here for those of goodwill and good faith. Now, I have to say, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, that even as a supporter of Scottish independence, I find it utterly inconceivable that any unionist government would have signed up to the kind of arrangements which placed a trade border down the middle of the Irish Sea while denying it was doing any such thing. And I think that all of these issues inherent in the protocol that we have could have been avoided had the UK government maintained a modicum of statecraft and respect for all parts of the Union by acknowledging the limitations of the mandate that they actually had from the Brexit referendum and by remaining in as close alignment as they could with the single market and customs union, thereby minimising the economic harms that we've seen to the UK since then and ensuring that no part of that precious union was left behind. But even yet, it seems that the government hasn't learned from its mistakes. The Scottish Government wasn't consulted by the UK Government before they took this action. And I believe I'm right in saying the UK Government didn't even afford the Scottish Government the courtesy of a phone call in advance to advise of these plans. And it's also been reported that the UK Government did not consult with their top legal adviser, the First Treasury Counsel, Sir James Eadie, on the legality of their moves. So we have a UK Government which, it seems to me, is in contempt both of international law, as we've seen in other matters in domestic law. And aspects round about the Prime Minister's current political travails are bad enough, but to stand up and use the full authority of a ministerial office to say that which is not seems to me to get right to the heart not just of the problems being presented by the protocol in its current form, but also about the fitness of the Prime Minister or anyone aspiring to replace him to hold office. I give way.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. It's clear the protocol isn't working. Northern Ireland business is suffering. May I ask the honourable gentleman, in what way does this bill act to the disadvantage of the European Union? Because it seems to me it's a very good way forward.
It seems to me that whether it disadvantages or not is not something that Her Majesty's Government gets to decide. And while I'm clear there are problems with the protocol, clearly there are aspects of the protocol that are working very well indeed. Indeed, the Treasury bench has admitted it, and if the honourable member will allow me to progress, I can set out some of the examples, particularly over trade, where it is not having the impact that we are told in all aspects it is. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I come from the point of view that trust has been broken, both between the UK Government and the people of all of these islands, as well as between the UK Government and our international partners, which seems to me to get right to the nub of the issues about trying to renegotiate it. I don't think we should really need to say this, but it's absolutely vital that the UK Government should be able to respect the international obligations that it enters into freely. Lord Butler, who was head of the civil service for 10 years, has said that this country has repeatedly criticised states like Russia and China for breaking the rules-based international order, and yet now holds that it's perfectly justified itself to breach international law. And it seems we've gone from a limited and specific breach to something which, in this bill, is potentially extensive and egregious. Even General Sir Richard Barnes, the former Chief of the Joint Forces Command who served in Afghanistan, Iraq and Northern Ireland, has said that what the government is proposing is short-sighted tactics which will do much harm strategically in the wider world. In fact, what is being done is particularly stupid. And he also went on to warn that these moves will empower adversaries, as it will, quote, undermine us with our enemies by giving them the opportunity to accuse us of hypocrisy when we call them out for breaking the rules-based international order. It will also undermine us with our allies who will doubt whether they can rely on us to keep to an agreement and keep to our word.
Can you give way?
Yes.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way. Listen to what he says with a great deal of interest. He's right to defend international law and international treaties. Did he raise the concerns he's just expressed when the European Union was busy breaking those treaties, for example, over subsidies to Airbus?
What about Tariq?
Well, the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West says it eloquently in one word, what aboutery. But I think we've been taken here by 40 years of political dysfunction in the party opposite and the various neuroses it's had over Europe, the exceptionalists of the punch-above-our-weight brigade, to be found extensively but not exclusively within a European research group where research seems to be at a premium, which has led us to this point. And in the process, I have to say, shredding any reputation that the UK Government might have preserved for either good, stable government or adherence to international norms. Because whatever the bluff and bluster and personal agendas that might be at play here, and I notice that the Foreign Secretary is no longer in her place, it is, of course, the UK's exit from the EU rather than the protocol which created this difficult situation. Because there were only ever 3 options which would allow this particular circle to be squared. That was either a return to a border on the island of Ireland, close alignment between the EU and UK regulatory standards to reduce the needs for checks, or for checks to be carried out at the main Northern Ireland ports. And of course, the further that there's a diversion from the single market and the customs union, the harder that border then eventually becomes.
I just wanted to ask the honourable gentleman if he was aware that De Valera himself in 1937 actually tore up the Anglo-Irish Treaty in exactly the same kind of way as he's accusing other people.
You're not responsible for De Valera.
The honourable gentleman seems to be confusing me with a representative of the government of Ireland. I mean, it's an interesting historical diversion, which I'd be more than happy to discuss with him later, but I'm not exactly certain how germane it is to this particular discussion that's here. It seems a little bit recondite, to say the least of it. Anyway, moving on, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government has presented a précis of the legal advice, and the Law Society of Scotland has identified a number of provisions in this bill which it believes to be inconsistent with the UK's international law obligations. Now, because of time is as it is, and we're only in the second reading, I don't intend to go into these points in any great depth or delve unnecessarily into the horrors of the empowerment of ministers that this bill would represent through the Henry VIII powers. But I would just highlight specifically in terms of Article 4 of the withdrawal agreement, which the issues which this bill creates, given that Article 4 states expressly that the UK cannot legislate contrary to its commitments through primary legislation. So we get to the point of necessity, which is ultimately the justification that the government is using here. And as I understand it, that rests on 2 key points. That there is, firstly, effectively, when viewed from London, no detriment to the single market from these proposals. And secondly, that it underwrites the government's wishes to protect the UK single market and also the Good Friday Agreement. Now, that was an argument that I think was neatly eviscerated by my honourable friend from Edinburgh South West in an earlier intervention. But there are 3 points, Madam Deputy Speaker, that instantly leap out to me from that. That firstly, as I've said, whether or not there is detriment is largely a subjective measure, and that whatever unilateral assertions there might be made on this, whether or not there is detriment, is something that requires to be determined in another manner. Secondly, invoking an invocation of necessity, it must also not seriously impair an essential interest of another party, and I think it's quite hard to argue that this isn't something that could at least be at risk of happening. But thirdly, it doesn't seem to me to be particularly credible now to cite the protocol as harming the single market of the Good Friday Agreement, when it was cited by HM Government as a means of protecting both of those things. The Prime Minister wanting to override a deal that he himself was happy to claim credit for having got Brexit done during his 2019 election campaign really doesn't seem to me to be the strongest basis for sustaining that argument. Now, in terms of the economic effect, Northern Ireland has clearly lagged behind the rest of the UK in economic performance in recent decades relative to the UK. Yet somehow, for some reason, it's currently outpacing every other part of the UK, except perhaps predictably for London. And there must be some reason why that might be. Perhaps, I don't know if anyone can help me with why that might be. But perhaps there's a clue.
Would he take a point? It may, if he were to examine the economic performance of Northern Ireland, he might find that, surprisingly, it's the service sector which has increased 7 times more than the manufacturing sector, and of course the service sector isn't covered by the protocol at all.
Well, manufacturing also seems to be doing quite well, as I recall, and perhaps having a foot in both markets and the easier access to both, in contrast to counterparts on the other side of the North Channel, might also be a reason for that. But a survey by the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce shows that 70% of businesses now believe that unique trading position with preferential access to both EU and UK single markets presents opportunities for Northern Ireland. The businesses reporting a significant problem has dropped from 15% to 8%. Now, while I wouldn't seek to diminish in any way the problems that 8% feel, it's perhaps an indication that many of the problems, at least initially, were because of the short lead-in time that was given and the lack of preparation and clarity ahead of the big changes which came in January 2021. So to come back to my fundamental point on this, we need a protocol. The nature of Brexit means there needs to be a protocol. It doesn't need to be exactly the same as this version, but what we absolutely don't need in the middle of a cost of living crisis is the prospect of increased trade frictions through needless conflict and a developing trade war with our largest overseas and closest market. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what I very much fear this legislation, if enacted and utilised, would do. So, I believe that the way forward is through negotiations. Now, like the man asked to give directions, I wouldn't be starting from this point for a variety of reasons that I needn't detain the House on. But we need negotiations which are based on trust, which are based in good faith, which are based on cooperation. And I think the UK government would stand a much, much better chance of success if it were driven by this, instead of this piece of legislative brinkmanship. And also, if it were to pursue measures for once which were motivated by a genuine desire to deliver the best possible outcomes out of this mess for all peoples in these islands, rather than simply pandering to the agendas of those in the tiny subset of the population that might have an influence over who the next leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party might happen to be. A party, Madam Deputy Speaker, which no longer seems to be very, very certain what it's here to conserve or to unify.
Here, here.
Mrs Theresa May.
Thank you.